Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H event space. You are tuned into the live mentorship with Chris Orwig, mastering the art of storytelling. I'm nervous. Can you tell, Chris?
You should be a little nervous because in this session you get to be in a new role, not the host this time,
Yeah, I'm
but the
out of the
student.
comfort seat. The comfort seat's
Yeah,
gone. There's no like, hey, Chris, I'll see you at the end for some Q&A. Turn my camera off. Listen.
right. Yeah, and just to catch everyone up, this is all about coaching, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through some slides to set it up, and then we're gonna do some coaching with Derek, and the idea is to help that make it relevant to everyone else, because sometimes it's like in critique. You watch someone else's image be critiqued, and because it's not yours, there's a little bit less emotional connection. You learn a lot. And so that's the hope here is that by kind of watching this, we can learn and then people can ask questions and we can go from there.
I love it. Well, I'll let you get started. I'll remind
Okay.
everybody to, if they have any questions, feel free to get them in. A huge thank you, of course, to Sony for hosting this series. I'm excited to get started on it, Chris. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Amazing. So maybe just give me a heads up when I have my keynote up here, and is that full screen and
There
everything
we
okay
go.
there?
Yep, full screen.
Yeah, so we're talking about coaching, mentoring, and there was a previous webinar we talked about this whole idea, but really it's the fastest way to grow, evolve, get better at craft, and to have one-on-one feedback for it. And the reason is that this is a lot of the gear I use. It doesn't matter what gear we have, we can still take really bad pictures, and photography is an iterative process where we go from bad to good or mediocre to magnificent or whatever it is. And out of all the crafts and art forms, I think it's one of the easiest to practice, meaning autofocus is really good, dynamic range is amazing, the gear is really good now, but it's one of the hardest to achieve greatness. And with that in mind, I think that's why coaching can really help because of the difficulty of the craft and of going through different waves and cycles of growth. And just keeping in mind this idea that we go from a starting point to something better. And that's always been the case with photography. It's very, very rare that you're a one-hit wonder, that you just get it right on the first shot. One of my mentors said to me this idea that stillness of hand can't make up for emptiness of heart. And I wouldn't have learned that without that mentor influence. And what that means is it doesn't matter how still you can hold your camera so you don't have camera shake. So it doesn't matter how technical you are. Without heart, it doesn't really get you very far. And so all of the photographs that I love that I've captured have that influence from my mentor in them. I'll show a handful more slides and then we're going to jump to Derek, but just kind of getting you kind of cued into the type of work that I'm creating and how my mentors influence me. You can see it doesn't matter how technically good it is. There has to be something a little bit more in there, whether it's strangers or commercial stuff or a fellow photographer. And you get a gist on the feeling of some of these frames that they have to have this sense of feeling. And getting good at photography, I think it has typically involves these things. You got to have some passion, some interest, some curiosity, some creativity. You got to practice the craft, right? And then the thing most people are missing is the feedback loop. A lot of people have passion. A lot of people practice. You test things out, try new ideas, capture lots of photos. But one of the things I found most of my students at workshops, at conferences, things that's keeping them from greatness is that feedback loop. Here's an example, kind of on my own. Go to a friend's wedding. I'm so excited about the bride by the river. I take the picture. It's horrible. So I do a little self-study. I then take another picture of another friend at a wedding. It's a little bit better, but then I have a mentor, and the mentor allows me to achieve something which is way beyond what I could have ever done if it were just on my own. Now, that mentor isn't present physically, but internally, they are with me in this moment. He was with me. I do provide coaching, and you can do a little 15-minute free coaching inquiry call if you're interested. I just throw that on here because that's kind of the context that I do a lot of this work. And when I coach, there are many different reasons why people do this. Sometimes they want to expand business, they want to be published, they want to get new clients, they want to improve composition. I've had a person I coached have one of her images show in this big gallery show. another person who's gone through a lot of loss of a husband, and she wanted to explore how to heal and be creative afterwards, or another friend who may be tuning in who is going on a safari and wanted to, kind of got a new camera and explore how do I approach that. So there's so many different reasons. The flow typically starts off with some kind of intention or goal. And then we look at things like how do we clarify that? How do we come up with a strategy? What are some assignments that can be done? And then, of course, some feedback. So coaching is different than like image critique. Image critique is just an image. How did I do or not do? This is more like, what are my goals? How do I get there? How do I have some assignments to practice that? And then how do I do some feedback? So let me pause right there and jump to what real example with a student. This was from a little while back, but I think it will give you an idea. And basically, actually, let me do the other tab. Talking to her about Steve McCurry's portraits, and I said, I think you should really study his composition. And so she went through and created these slides as her assignment. She studied where the eye was in the center of the frame, where the face was. She did this with different compositions. You can see, has bullet points on what she's learning. She's also analyzing how he approaches his craft and really deconstructing someone who she finds inspiring. And through that practice or that assignment, she's now then cultivating some skills. And then what she's going to do eventually is apply them to some of her own pictures. So that's what this one was. And so then we have an assignment, 20 vertical, 20 horizontal, 5 images in these each different categories. And I know I'm kind of skimming because the assignment is specific to her. And you can see then how she asked her daughter if she could practice, and she went through and tried all these different ideas out. And then after working through all those different ideas and really exploring composition in this way, and I'm going to jump back to my slides for a minute, then we moved on to other assignments, which were a little bit more about finding her voice and her style, and she's really found it. But you can see kind of back to this slide here that there's all these things like maybe it was craft and composition and storytelling and voice, and the assignments, the feedback on those assignments, and then actually capturing images and then exploring how to elevate that can really help. So today, my man, Derek, who, what an awesome photo, by the way. Who captured this? This is so good. This is so you.
A wonderful friend of mine, Alex, captured
Okay.
this.
Yeah, this is just like so you. And one of the things I ask people to do, and I have them fill out these coaching forms, we'll see a little bit of that later, answer all these questions, is include a photo of himself. And in this one, what I love about you, it shows your warmth, it shows your sense of humor, your smile, you're just cool. And there's kind of abstract background. So we know that this is not a studio photo of you. This is you out in the wild, because I think you kind of come alive out in the wild. Again, I'm projecting or reading into. And in one of the lines in one of the forums that Derek, you filled out, you said you love your job, but you've plateaued in some ways with your photography. And so that's something that happens to all of us, right? I go to my mentors all the time with that. Like I'm at this point. How do I get past it? Go back to those wedding photos. Like I have a good wedding photo, but it just feels kind of corny, cheesy, normal. How do I get past that? So I love that. And in coaching, a lot of times I will ask people, like, what are your goals? I have this question: name 5 things you hope to gain from the coaching engagement. And these are the ones that you said. You want some direction, some clarity, some guidance, different perspective, and a renewed sense of purpose. And the reason why this is so important is asking people to clarify these is a lot of times people will say, I want to get better, but then I'm like, okay, well, how? And in what ways? And what's the real goal? And so we have to get to the heart of that. Meaning I had one student who really wanted to get into a publication. And so I said, well, what publication? What kind of story? And so then we were able to reverse engineer it a little bit. And then Derek, maybe you can keep staying off camera, then we'll go to on camera. But I just want to dive into sort of something I would put together. Let me see if I can zoom in on this one a little bit more. Go full screen here. And I can't zoom in. My normal zoom shortcut isn't working. So let's just see here. Is there a way to zoom? or well, if there isn't, I'll just kind of read it and scroll through it. But what I'm going to scroll really quickly so you guys can kind of see there's some questions Derek's answered. I put together a Google Doc so I can kind of wrap my brain around who is this person? Where are they coming from? And this kind of happens before we're talking. So this is why I'm doing this now, Derek. So, but I learned a little bit about background. I'm just going to highlight a few of these things for you guys. 6 of 8 kids, um, lot mix of family life, college, your words, wasted potential, no real desire or drive, didn't have an idea what I wanted to do, graduate English degree, post college job at a car rental company. I love that. Hated it. No idea what I want to do. And then this was awesome. 2008. When I read lines like this, they just make me like immensely happy. 2008, lost my job and discovered photography. And it's amazing how much loss or challenge can be a motivator to discover our true passions. My mentor used to always say, "Is Chris, never waste the hard stuff that you're going through because that's the stuff that's going to feed your photography the most." Um, and then he also said, "Soul-sucking corporate jobs." Again, for me, like I have had those as well. And working inside of a building and having someone tell you what to do made me realize, oh, I want to do something differently. And then kind of talks about some other things, event space, settled into who I am. And then here is that line where it's love my job, but there's a little bit of a plateau. And Derek, can you see what I'm doing here, highlighting? And I don't know how
Yeah.
hard it is to read the text, but and then have some other questions. We'll maybe do these live. I'm just going to go down to a little bit about like strengths that we have, what are fears, um, without overthinking it. What's a life mission? Inspire others, passion, happiness, a way to figure out their journey. Um, Look at kind of childhood or life. When were we most alive? What's a dream you've yet to fulfill? What brings you vitality? What feeds your soul? And then I love this one. I'm just going to kind of boost this up. So basically, what I'm doing as a potential mentor or coach for someone is I'm trying to tap into like, where are they coming from? Like some people are just broken and need a break. Some people are excelling at such a high level and need fine tuning. I need to ask, like, figure out what makes them come alive. What are they searching for? And the reason I'm saying all this stuff isn't so much so we can figure out Derek, but for you, if you ever pursue being coached or mentored, you need to be vulnerable like Derek was and bring this forward and kind of tune into what does feed my soul. I love being able to see the world around me in a beautiful way, capture it in a way so that others can enjoy my vision of it. And by doing that, it's going to bring to the mentor relationship or the coaching so much more. So let me stop sharing here for a moment and let's go back to some on camera stuff. And I also ask people to send images. So I have those, which we can jump to in a second. But maybe let's just kick it off. And let me ask you a question, Derek. Like, how are you feeling about, I'm going to say the pre-work that happens before coaching? What was that like for you? What was the value or not? It doesn't matter if, but, and I'm again trying to help this be relevant for our listeners because the whole trick is like, and I'm going to say the same thing for going to a workshop or a conference. 99% of people don't do pre-work. They just show up expecting the conference to have the answer for them. But what you have to do on the flight out or whatever is brainstorm. What do I want to get out of this? What's my goal? Who am I? Where am I? Is my creativity from 0 to 10? Am I sitting at 8 and 9 and want to get to a 10? Or am I at like a 1, 2? And I would be happy with a 5. Or am I, and again, I'm just playing here. Sometimes I go to workshops for Sony and I'm like, you know what? I really want to master using my 35 mm lens, creating horizontal portraits. And so I'm like, boom, here's my focus. And then bring that in. So back to you. Pre-work, what was that like? And then also being here now, what is it like?
So pre-work, it was challenging. Like
Yeah.
you really, I mean, I studied English, so I know the power of words and the
Mm.
power of there's different ways to ask different questions to get different levels of engagement and to take somebody And instead of just asking something that kind of leads you to a dead end, to lead them into a
Mm.
place that causes them to look from within.
Mm.
And I think that's where it hit me like, wow, this isn't, again, like you said, you go into mentorship and you're just like, I just show up for class and that's it.
Right.
And I'm like, I have to sit here and I have to ask myself tough questions because it's like therapy. How are you going to help me if I can't tap into my own resources and see what am I lacking? What am I looking for?
Right.
Do I know what I'm looking for? So it was challenging for me. Um, and it's almost like, man, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm tapping my hands on my chair. And it's like, it is because you
Yeah.
don't, it's kind of like sitting down for a therapy session where you don't know where you're going to go, what you're going to tap into, because you're pushing beyond anything that you really, we don't put pressure on ourselves. No matter how self-aware you are, generally, you don't really question yourself and you don't dive deep. So for me sitting here now, it's like, okay, well, I could already tell on the pre-work I had to do a lot of work to search within. And now I'm kind of, it's like this feeling, this anxiousness of like, wow, where are we going to go? Where's this ride going to take me?
Right. Right. And that's amazing. And hopefully that's helpful for people to hear too. And to realize like sometimes I almost think with the pre-work, like if for whatever reason, let's say we couldn't do the session, you would still get value out of it because
Totally.
you have to be honest with yourself in front of someone else. And the same thing with the assignments. Like I ask people to go do assignments, and the fact that they know they're going to show me the photos or I'm going to show someone else the photos, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this isn't just playing around. This isn't just me going to like do this. But if I'm going to have to bring these, I say I'm going to do something and then I have to do it well and then also deliver that, not a client, it elevates it in a unique way. And even if that final meeting didn't happen, just knowing it might have happened helps us elevate our game. And that's where I think we improve. And so I'll tell kind of a different narrative. For a long time, I did interactive and print design, and I remember the experience of working on something. Who knows how many hours? 40 hours, 60 hours, 80 hours, or something. And then you show it to a group of people, pull something up in like a conference, creative conference room, ad agency stuff. And the instant you pull it up, you see a spelling mistake. And that spelling mistake had been there for tens of hours, like I don't know how many hours and hours and hours. But it was until you saw it through their eyes that it became apparent. And so there's something about partnering with people and seeing your own life and your own work collaboratively that really makes a difference. And so that's part of what this is. I also like, shoot, I can't afford, let's say to do, 8 sessions of coaching, or I don't have access to a coach. There's ways to scale all of this, right? Like, let's go back to me in that interactive design era. I could easily have said to a couple buddies, I could be like, hey, Derek, hey, Danny, will you guys just look over my shoulder for a second? I want to show you this thing I'm working on. I would have seen the same spelling mistake right away, right? And it just would have that I created a little distance from myself, invited 2 friends into the mix, and it helped change it. So I imagine for you, and this is where kind of a question is how are you starting to see yourself and your journey differently, even before we've like, quote, done anything?
I th- the phrase that comes to mind is the Mandela effect. It's like
Mm,
I feel like we all have a certain perspective of who we are, and it's not necessarily the right perspective, but we've been living with it our whole lives until you really start to answer questions. And this is where the question selection comes in, where it's like, like I said, before we got on live, it's like, man, I thought you were going to ask me like what my favorite color was, what's my
yeah,
astrological sign. You tap into these answers and it starts to really piece together who you might be, or what are the pieces that make you. Maybe that's a better way to form it, is what are the pieces that make up, that make that you're made up of. You start to see what you get an idea for what means a lot to you. So it's kind of like these roundabout themes that can kind of, I'm thinking like a Venn diagram of like, okay, I'm
yeah,
starting to see certain things that you're kind of like over here. but then it touches upon this and you get general
Right.
ideas. It's not like definitive answers. It puts you
Right.
in these different zones where you kind of want to explore more. Well, why do I search for that? Or okay, I noticed that I all my answers revolve around the idea of this.
Hmm.
And so I started to that's where it got me going is really looking, I was searching before even getting to you.
Yeah.
I was searching within myself for like, okay, I'm trying to make sense of my own answers.
Right. I love that. And that's a huge, hopefully, takeaway for people with the coaching thing is you have to have a really strong ego awareness, self-awareness before you enter into a coaching relationship or mentoring. Because the nature of coaching or mentoring is in a way, and I do this as well, we're kind of putting ourselves below someone else. We're saying like, hey, this person, will you, same thing with like bringing friends. I'm kind of saying, will you guys look at this interactive design and review it? I'm kind of saying, I'm going to step back. I want to get your input. But if we're a little too wishy-washy, what can happen is we can be over influenced by the person we're seeking to influence us.
Hmm, interesting.
And right, because let's say, I don't know, um, well, let's just go to like the one student with Steve McCurry. We started with Steve McCurry and she really wanted to do travel photographs, but then realized I kind of helped her realize she's never going to do travel photographs based on the stage of her life, her job, her family requirements. I mean, not never, but not in the moment. And so if she maybe had gone to Steve as a mentor, she might be like, oh, I just have to do this. I have to like quit everything. And, I don't know how, I'm not if I'm explaining this well, but instead I was like, well, what could we take away from your admiration of his work that you could apply? And she was like, composition. And so it's that question of what can I take away? Like, let's say you and I, our styles are so different. You don't want to capture images like me. I don't necessarily want to capture images like you, but I do want to learn from you. So it could be fun to do a flip flop of this too and have you coach me. I would love that.
I would love that.
Um, but it would require that I would be like, I'm not just going to become Derek. I'm not just
Mm.
going to, I'm not going to let go of all that makes me and my values and interests and passions and all this. But I'm going to explore how Derek can help me be more of me. And so that pre-work hopefully does that. So one of the questions in there was this idea of, I'll kind of phrase it in a new way to maybe add some freshness and then get an answer from you. And I know I have your written answer, but let's say you do a coaching with someone, and let's just be 6 month coaching thing where we meet every couple weeks or something. 6 months, 8 months from now, you meet a friend you haven't seen since before you started. And before you started, you said, hey, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do some coaching, mentoring. And then you see that friend after it's done. And the friend was like, well, what'd you learn? What were your takeaways? What'd you accomplish? And so this is kind of thinking through like, there's a lot of ways to access this, but I think in some ways, sort of like, what are my biggest hopes that I get out of this that I can be like, oh my gosh, as a result of what's happened, this. And so for you, let's just say, because it's not 6 months, but let's just say tomorrow you run into a buddy and they're like, hey, what was your takeaway? What did you gain from that? Or from this? And I'll have you answer in a second, but what I'm trying to help people think about too is this isn't just goal setting, but it's a little bit more um, magical. I have a friend who's a regenerative doctor. So if you go and see her, she asks this question as well. 6 months from now, 12 months from now, what do you want to tell people? And rather than saying, well, I really wish that my knee feels a little bit better. She's like, no, use more imagination. You say, well, you know what? I went skiing 8 times this winter. I ran a 10K race. I got one of my PR times. And for her as a regenerative medicine doctor, it helps her go like, oh, now I know what we're talking about. We're not just like talking about like going to get groceries and coming home. We have a little magic there. We have a little like goal that is personalized to you. So anyway, you see someone later, you can answer this however you want. What would you hope to be able to say to that person?
That I have started down a path of figuring out what moves me,
Okay.
because I think ultimately, as I answered in somewhere along the lines in that forum, it was a lot of the themes were lack of direction, wanting more purposefulness in my work, kind of feeling like at time like I'm just floating in the ether. So I'd want to tell somebody that I'm more sure about the work, the direction I want to go in, as far as creating more with intent, having more purpose in my work. I think I'm tapped out of just lifting the camera and taking pictures of. I still like to take pictures of things that I like, and if I see a nice scene, but I feel like I just want more from my work. So that's what I would want to tell somebody, yeah. I I've tapped excuse me, I've tapped in more to what moves me, and
Awesome.
I've been able to apply that to my work to break out of the
Okay.
rut.
And then they say back, amazing. Did you achieve any projects?
What's funny is I swear on my life, Chris,
Yeah.
I'm not lying. After I filled that form out, it really got me thinking. And you have probably heard me say this somewhere along the line. It's like I suck with coming up with projects. I just can't, or I come up with something, I'm not really into it. And I filled out that form. I'm unwinding, eating my chicken and French fries over here on my computer, going through some recent images. I pop in a memory card of images that from my son's camera. And I'm like, wow, we go out with both of our cameras and we see the world in different ways. And it's cool to see it from his perspective and see some of the same moments captured from his eye. And I don't know if it was just serendipity. I fill out this form, but it really just got me thinking about exactly what I just said. What moves me? What really, really, really moves me beyond just aesthetics? What makes me feel something? What makes me really want to raise my camera? And the second I put that memory card in and started transferring images over, I pulled up this one frame, and I'm not even lying. I was like, wait, was I using this? I thought I was using this camera. It looked like I took the picture. And a lot of them are all over the place.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
blurry. He's not
Yeah.
focusing.
Yeah.
And I saw one, and I'm like, holy crap! Like he
Mm.
took that. It looks like,
Wow.
and I'm like, and it just kind of started to click, and I'm like, there's a connection there, and it's the first cohesive project idea that I've had in a long time where I'm like, I would really love to start doing this and be passionate about looking at our work together and seeing, comparing I don't know what the end goal would be, but I loved seeing, I pulled up my images from that day from my camera, and I had two separate folders up, and I loved just juxtaposing and going back and forth and seeing the same moments through both of our different eyes. I don't know if that helps. That was very
No, that
circular.
was amazing. And how old is he now?
He's 7.
7. And so let's tease that out a little bit, which this is so fun and powerful because it aligns with so many other things you said. You talked about like from your values, 3 things as an adult you love and do well, being a dad, being a photographer, being a mentor. So there they are all in this. Um, you love like to your fears were related to family. What brings you vitality is related to family. I mean, there's this strong like thread, and you're also in the thick of it. Where something like this could happen. So what I mean by that, you're not maybe an empty nester nostalgically reflecting back on that and valuing family from that perspective. You're like in this moment. So it obviously is like cool weaving with it. So with that, um, what might be a way to start that project?
Well, one thing I've been really dead set on is not pushing him in any direction.
Okay.
I've always wanted to be the type of parent that I open him up to a ton of opportunities and let him decide
Yeah.
with minimal, like, okay, you really like this, or you don't, he used to play soccer. Got to a point I could tell his heart wasn't in it. Do you like soccer? Do you like playing it? No, you can be honest. No, I don't really. Okay. We don't have to sign you up again.
Right. Right.
With photos, he loves it.
Okay.
And I have to tamp down the
Mm.
educator in me of like, do this. And like, he has this old little point and shoot camera. And it's like, I tried to put a nice brand new shiny $2,500 camera in his hand,
Yeah.
rejected it. He
Yeah.
wanted the $150 point and shoot.
Right.
And I'm like, you know what? The same stuff that matters to me doesn't matter to him.
Mm.
So I think, you know, it would be easy in a perfect world. You got a little Hawkeye Huey, and he's like taking, really just going out and just killing it and really, really, so it's like he's a typical kid. He likes to do a bunch of different things. It's not like he's just narrowed in on photography. So I think the direction I would want to see is from just strictly a life through our eyes.
Yeah.
And I think there's beauty in juxtaposing that really intentional adult professional photographer mindset with the free thinking, casual, almost aloofness of a kid. And I think
Naivete,
sometimes,
maybe. Right. Sorry. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Perfect word. Perfect word.
Yeah.
It's like they just go out and they enjoy, and he
Yeah.
literally he takes pictures of what he sees on the TV. He takes pictures of the LCD screen of pictures he likes that I've taken. And it's like we put so much thought in, and maybe that's something. Maybe there's something to
Right.
that where we almost overthink. I love in that one question when you're like,
Yeah.
don't overthink it. And I was like,
Yeah.
man, I would have overthought. I definitely would have overthought. And I think the beauty in looking through his images is
Yeah.
there is no thought. He likes something, he pushes a button, he doesn't think about settings. Half the time he moves his camera away before it's done even taking the exposure.
Yeah.
But I think there's something to be said for that. He's totally in the moment.
Okay. And then can we play with this one a little bit?
Yeah.
So I know you love print and books, and you mentioned book not related to this, but do you have because part of the coaching thing, that what I'll do a lot, like you kind of saw with the one student with Steve McCurry influence. I was like, first, let's study what this is. She creates all that. We come back, we talk about it, we look at her work. And then I say, okay, 20 images, five, five, and five. Here's what each five need to be. And it's basically creating some structure because what happens to most of us is we're two steps behind that. We love someone's photography. We're like, wow. And that's it, right? So it's like, wow, then study it, think about it, refine it, kind of like what you're doing here. Like, this is so cool. You're kind of refining why it's cool, thinking about it. And then the next step is to then say, well, what do I do strategically? And this really comes from a mentor of mine, Keith Carter, who's a fine art photographer. He said to me once, whenever I have a project or a book project, and he's done a number of photography books, very successful. He says, I get a box, and he does all analog stuff. So he gets a big box and he puts the working title name of the project on the box. And then he puts a image count that he's aiming for, 20 images, 25, 50, whatever it is. And then it's an empty box. And then he's like 2 years to fill the box. And for fine art photographers, which they inspire me so much, they have this longer time frame. I get so impatient. I'm more like 2 weeks, 25 images, we're like, let's
Overnight
get this.
projects.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Let's get this thing done. But of course, for me, I was like, wow, that's interesting. So he said, every time I walk into my studio, I see the empty box or I see the box with five images. I get to see the holes. Like, okay, this is a thing about horses, and I have a lot of these up close shots, but I don't have anything. They're almost too much of like the horse's face or something. I don't have any of hoofs or tails or misty mornings or so it kind of like the box, the framework, the structure to fill it up makes his project come to life, and then eventually he has this book. And I think the rest of us are like, wow, like that just kind of happened by itself. And we but what we need to do is move to like the refinement we've done to like strategy. So all that being said, for you, a strategy, part of that may be an end goal, may not be, but maybe like, yeah, it'd be cool to just, I'm going to throw out ideas, not you take whatever, what do you want? But it's one of the things that comes to mind is you said you love going out with them, so it might be like, yeah, once a whatever duration of time, I just want to prioritize that, and it's almost like if I'm going to say your son plays soccer, my kids play soccer, it'd be like twice a week. I want to like play soccer in the front yard with them. Or my daughter's playing volleyball now. Like, a couple times a week, I want to work on her serve with her, and she wants to do it too. But if I don't do that, it's just not going to happen. So, and then maybe the longer goal is I really want her to make this, be able to have the skill to give a good shot at making this team. So for you, what are short-term things? Are there any specifics numerically? And then does this lead to anything? And the trick with this stage of it, which maybe you're feeling a little bit, and this, at least for me, it suddenly feels a little, I'm just going to use my own language here. It feels a little gross. It feels a little mechanistic. It feels a little like you're pinning the butterfly to the wall versus letting it fly around. It feels a little counterintuitive to most creatives. Like for me as a creative, I just want to like create and capture these pictures and, and do this and that. And I've done book projects, but I've had editors and friends be like, okay, what's your structure? How many chapters? How many page book? What's the form factor of the book? Give me a sample chapter. Give me a sample chapter by this date. And then once I do that and get through that structural component, then I can follow that, fill the box, so to speak, and I walk away with a pretty amazing project. So a lot of rambling there, but also some helpful info.
Definitely.
So the first thing I want you to do is to tap into how does it feel to you to kind of impose strategy or structure on this. And it's important to do that. Like it feels exciting or it feels limiting or it feels like I'm really unsure. All that's like really important to aware because otherwise what people do is they create a structure they hate and then they don't follow it. What I try to do is say, I don't like being so structured, but just verbalizing that helps me kind of befriend the structure. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, really? 10 images in the next 2 weeks? Like, seriously, like, that's so uncomfortable for me. But uncomfortable means growth, but that helps me achieve this goal. So, therefore, that. So, feeling about it. And then what are some ideas about it?
And it's funny because that's always been my arch nemesis is structure.
Hmm.
And I think that for me, structure is the precursor to inaction. And I
Hmm.
don't get anything done because, again, it's like, it's the same reason I haven't really dove into video the same way I want to. Because what do? I don't think about it. I go out and I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to take some random video clips out on the street. And then have no structure. So then they just sit on my computer. I don't do anything with them. And what happens? It demotivates me from getting really into it because I don't have a storyline. I don't have a story. And I think project wise, it's the same thing. As you were talking, I started to piece things in my head like, yeah, what would be a structure to this? What's a structure that is something I can follow? He's on his side of things, his is more unstructured. So it's like the structure has to factor in the unstructured nature of what he takes photos of.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, it's like anyone who's put a book together. You can't just walk up to a publisher and just throw a bunch of random images and say, "Hey, I take really good photos." What's
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
story? What's your cadence? What
Right. Right.
so
Yeah.
I think for me that would be structure has to be like the framework. That's where I always fall apart. I fall apart before I even get going because it's like I ride off on a bike and it's just two wheels and a handlebar and there's no frame. You're
Yeah.
not going to get far. So I think I would have to figure out what is a palatable structure to really give this project legs.
Yeah. And let's play with this a little bit. If you let's say we're going to follow up in 2 weeks, because that's typically the rhythm I do with
Okay.
people. Because it's not like if you follow up in a month, you kind of almost forgot what we talked about. If we follow up next week, it's almost like you don't have enough time to really accomplish anything. So 2 weeks is a kind of a sweet spot. So we're going to create uh, like an end goal idea. We can always change our end goal. Like, what would you love to do with this? Like, I'd love to do a book that's 8 by 10, has 50 images. I'm inventing. You come up with something, working title idea, and then 2 weeks from now, Chris. I'm going to come back to you with um, something, some deliverable, because that's where back to those three things I said: passion, practice, and feedback. That even with our structure, we can say that, like, I'm going to do 5 images, but it's really different if I'm going to do 5 images and I'm going to show Chris those 5 images based on what I said. There's like a little bit of elevation to that. So end goal kind of idea. And the thing I tell students a lot with our end goals is it's kind of like buying a shirt. Like before I bought this shirt, I tried it on. I was kind of like, how does it feel? Should I get a size larger, size smaller? And if we decide as the project unfolds that it just doesn't fit right, it's constraining to think of this as a book. This is more about, rather than a physical product, this is more about cool time, hang out with my son. Then we just take that garment off and put a different one on. But if we don't ever try something on, we're still stuck back in practice, passion and practice, right? So I want to try to get to strategy and feedback and all that kind of stuff. So end goal, 2 weeks from now, what would you like to deliver? And some of my students will say, well, you tell me, Chris, and we can help do that. But it often works better if the student decides. And let me tell maybe a little mini story. Can I, just to do this, because sometimes it's helpful hearing other people. This one guy, he did this amazing work with mountain bikers. He lived in Arizona. He loved mountain biking. He was photographing all these mountain bikers. And he was just like, it was like mind-blowingly good work, right? And he's like, I just want to get paid to do this, and I want you to help me figure out how do I get paid. And I'm like, okay, technically, there's nothing we need to work on. Like you got that figured out. Like you know how to tell the story, you know how to do all the stuff, the light, all these things. And so we kind of agreed like his skill level was there, but the problem was no one needed his images. Like amateur mountain bikers do not need an image of themselves mountain biking. And what I mean by need is they may want or like an image. Like that's pretty cool, like seeing me do that. But there's no monetary value. Like even, an amateur would never even pay you $50 for an image. They think it would be cool if you send it to them. So for starters, there's no need. So I was like, and he was kind of crushed by that. Like, what do you mean no one needs these? I'm like, no one needs these. They're great images, but you told me you want to get paid. There's no financial incentive for this. So I said, what you need to do is you need to find someone who's sponsored, influencers. All these mountain biking guys are sponsored by like 6 different people. Find someone in your town, show them your work, say you'd love to go out, do this with them, create content for them. They can use it and whatever. And he was like, okay, I don't even know how to find them. I'm like, here's the deal. I need you in 3 weeks' time to photograph 3 people. I need 25 images in each 3. And he did it. And when he did that, all the riders shared the work. All the riders' brands reshared the work. Suddenly, he became a commercial mountain bike
Wow.
photography because he actually flipped that switch of achieving the goal he wanted to. Now, if his goal was not commercial, we would have done something totally different. But the point being was that in that case, I had to kind of tell him what he needed to do because he was too close to it to realize. And then once he did it, it was just natural. And that's how, every sponsored person needs images of themselves. All those brands need them to be creating content because that's how people get sponsored in this day and age. It's not what the brand does for the athlete, it's what the athlete does for the brand, and then all the way around. So I'm just sharing that story to do that. And I'm going to do one more just to kind of fill the ether. Another person really wanted to do a collaboration with her daughter, who is a writer, and do this story for a publication of some sort. And so we reverse engineered it a little bit and talked about what kind of story she wanted to tell. Long story short, I gave her assignment to go photograph this 90-something-year-old artist, this painter. He was this wonderful man, still painting in her local town. Then her daughter wrote a story about it that complimented the photos. They submitted it to multiple publications. One of them picked it up, and boom, it was done. And so mine was like, okay, you got to go photograph. We had a few options in case he said no. One of these things, you got to get the writing done. And then after that, you have to have ways of submission, right? And then she did it. So there was there's a passion, the practice, and then the feedback, accountability was she came back to me with the images. We talked about which ones, the assembling, the doing, and then it happened. And I think other people look at that and they're like, wow, you got published. Like, how'd they find you? Yeah. 96-year-old artist doesn't like find you. They're not like on Instagram saying, Chris, I like your work. And, or the newspaper or magazine or something isn't like, wow, we just found you. And like you generate it and then it becomes something. And there's a strategic path in a confined amount of time. And I know you know all these things. We all know all these things. I know all these things, but I'm not going to do it unless my mentor is there challenging me a little bit. So this is where a little bit of the challenge. So back to you now, end project. Even if you're not totally 100% satisfied with it, it's getting close. And then second, 2 weeks from now, what are you going to hit me with?
So end project, you know, I love print.
Yeah.
Uh, I want to see my images in print next to his. I want to,
Okay.
I want to have
Yeah. Like
our
side
work
by side
married
almost.
together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, 2 weeks,
Okay.
5 images from me, images from him, uh, the same moment through our different perspectives.
Okay. The same moment. That could be a fun working title. Just hearing you say that. Um, because it's kind of like, what is, and then story of father and son. Okay. So 10 images. And then the delivery of those images, we're just going to tease this out a little bit. Um, because in coaching, sometimes, and as photographers, we're all kind of scrappy. What I mean by that is, yeah, I can just like email you 5 images, or whatever. Or I could use Canva and I could create a little mock layout and I could have, which means for spreads. And I'm reading myself into your story. And this is where you have to have a strong ego as a person being coached. You have to be like, no, I don't want like a side by side. I want something else. But my job as the coach or mentor is to kind of throw something out there. Your job is to take, away from me and make it your own. So that's why I'm doing this. So it's not an imposition, it's just an ideation. But it's like I would want a better delivery than
I'm still here.
okay, awesome. A better delivery than just you email me 10 images and I'm like, 10 images. I don't even know what this is. Who's who? I don't know. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know how to qualify what this is versus maybe you do a little bit of layout work. There's a title page. There's the images side by side. There's a little bit of a narrative of the story. So I'm like drawn into this. And there's a reason why I care as an objective viewer of this. It goes from objective to subjective. And that's what you do with the narrative, the story, the setup, the title, the layout, all that kind of stuff. Um, how does that feel to you? And if your camera isn't on, we can talk in audio, or I can jump to other slides too. We can kind of pivot if we need to for a second.
Yeah, it feels great. And I think, we talk all the time about, why mentorship, and we talk about
Right.
investing in ourselves, right? And
Right.
I got myself here, which is, you can look at it the good way or the why am I being mentored way. Yes, I got
Right.
myself here to a great place, but I also
Yeah.
got myself here to a plateau.
Yeah.
And so, you know, for me, I think it's something that I'd want to take on that challenge. When you said like a Canva, and it's
Yeah.
so easy to drop images in a Dropbox,
Right. Right.
and that's
Right.
so me. It's it's me. It's laziness. That approach again, that got me to the plateau. And I think
Yes.
this is the beauty of mentorship: is someone to provide outside perspective, outside options. You know what? Taking the extra work to do a nice little layout, even putting it in the canvas side by side, that added step, it also helps cement the vision. It helps me see, before the finished product as I'm working on it, which is also a motivating factor. It's like getting up and folding your bed, making your
Right.
folding your
Right.
sheets in the morning, making your bed.
Yeah.
It's one small act, and you're like, you know what? I got a nice sense of accomplishment. I'm going to roll that into the next task. So I think for me, that's how I look at it, where it's like everything in the past would always be like, dude, let me just, or Rick, I'll drop you a Dropbox. Like,
Yes.
that's what I did with
Yes.
the first images. I just sent you a
Yeah.
Dropbox. And it's like, it's so easy for me to just stay in that same lane that got me to the plateau. And if I really want to challenge myself, this is where I think it requires me to listen to the mentor. Let the mentor, hey, yes, stand strong. If it's something that I'm like, remember back there was one time we had you on and we were talking about like, yeah, let's get, projects and I'm gonna go out.
Right, right,
And it's like, sometimes you got to be real with yourself. It's like, all right, I can't do 30 images this week. I don't have the time for it.
right, right.
But I think this is something that's doable for me and something that is going to push me out of my comfort zone in the right direction. And I think that's what I need is I need to get out of this place of stagnancy. I need to get everything moving. So yeah, I would
Yeah,
love
and
to.
just go
Yeah,
ahead,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was just going to say, and it's what we all need, right?
Yeah,
And I
totally.
hope that's where this is relevant to other people is that and that's the nature of photography, why I was kind of showing these before and afters. That there's always, and this is the beauty of photography. It's not like a linear climb from like here we are up to the top of a pyramid. It's more of like these waves, and that's how creativity is, and that's how any kind of art form, writing music and poetry and literature and all this stuff and creativity is where we're kind of exploring like, okay, here I am now, and now I'm down in the trough, and now I'm going up and getting an outside push or nudge or perspective. And of course, we want it all to be true to who we are. And then we want to also, I think one of the reasons why we are in this visual art creative space is because we want to make something that didn't exist now exist, right? So we are in the field of like making invisible stuff visible. And so when we have a project which has a some kind of tangible component to it, at least that I've found, there's this different commitment. So what I might add to this would be like, yes, Canva layout or something, and then print that out and just lay it on your desk or tack it up. Because again, back to Keith Carter's empty box, and he would go through the things. Or in my case, when I do a book project, I print out the layouts, I set them on the ground, and I just kind of look at them and I'm like, huh. And I'll see things like, wow, the way that sequence went was really kind of corny and cheesy. It was like almost too obvious. And it allows me to get it off a machine because everything looks kind of cool on a machine but when you print it, you're creating a little more distance, viewing distance, and you're removing the illumination of the screen. And you're kind of asking, does this does this kind of deliver on its own? So what I would love to see, I mean, if we were really doing this, would be something along the lines of, yeah, we have 5 and 5, 2 weeks from today, and we have a layout, and then you print it. And whether you're printing it, stapling it, printing it, tacking it up, I would love for you to do that because that requires a different commitment from you. Because a lot of us, like, how do we print? And some people will say, well, I don't have a printer. I'm like, well, go to FedEx and print it. Do anything, just print it. And it gives us something to talk about that's different had it just been 5 images emailed, right? And there's different degrees of all these kind of things. I've had students um, mail me content. So I have stuff in hand. And then when we're reviewing it, I'm looking at the physical artifact and we're talking about the energy that it's generating or not generating or what are ways to refine it. But when a student mails me something, I am like, game on, like this is happening. But I have a lot of people that I'll coach and mentor, well, where I'll suggest an assignment and they don't do it. And the thing is that's fine. I get it. We all have stuff in life that comes up and all those things. But my hope is always that they kind of take the bait because what I've seen is when people have done it, like the mountain biking guy or whatever, the person who wanted to be published or get new clients or whatever, when the assignment leads to the goal, back that we talked about earlier, 6 months from now, 8 months from now, where we can tell someone, yes, I have this new passion. I accomplished this project. I did all this, and then that led to this, and all of a sudden this. That never happens accidentally. It happens intentionally, strategically. So I think that could be a fun additive component to this. And again, we're just kind of playing. Are we really going to do this? I don't know. But it's more just conceptually. How does that land or resonate for you, being in the student seat, so to speak?
Oh, totally. I mean, I think committal, committal is really that's at the heart of all of this. If you can't commit or you're not willing to commit, one thing just to jump out of the student seat real quick
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can, I'm sure there's have been tons of people who come to you for advice, or
Yeah.
whether it's just a message, or whether it's someone who, approaches you through professional services. And you have every once in a while, you come across the people that don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
They want the benefit, they want to reap the rewards, but they don't want to do the work. So sitting in the student seat, no one knows it better than someone who's been on the flip side of the coin, that now that I'm in the student seat, I have to do the work. That's the only way you get better. And the work requires, you know, uncomfortable questions sometimes, or pushing out of your comfort zone, or doing things that might not be native to the way your process has always worked. Because I think that's at the heart of change, is at the heart of change. You have to change
Right.
something. If you don't change something, nothing's going to change, as redundant as that sounds.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, there's a lot there. And what hopefully as people are listening to this and thinking about their own stuff is that it's it's all like easy, obvious stuff. Like sometimes I kind of laugh, with like coaching and mentoring. It's like go back to the mountain biking kid, um, or a younger man, super talented guy. I was just like, hey, you should photograph people who are sponsored. Like that's all I said, which is like, duh, right? It'd be like telling a wedding photographer, you should, you want to make money doing weddings. Well, you should publish a rate, you should show your work, and you should, start accepting jobs, and then they're like, someone paid me. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's like not rocket science. It's maybe what I'm saying. But back to your point, it is being committed to that process with that goal aligned with your values. Like I wanted to go back to one of your things you had said about growth in your life. What would that look like? And one of the things you said, the kind of growth I'm looking for is in handling the trying times with the same vigor and ease of the smooth times. And I love that. I'm just looping that back in at this point because as we start to push into a project, I feel like those are great words to kind of reflect back, which is like, how then can we do this project, which is hard? It requires commitment, time, energy, effort, all those things, but with this sense of ease so that that sense fills the project with that. Because there's some projects you look at and you're like, wow, you like tried really hard, It's almost like you can tell they were just like, you know. But for you, it sounds like finding this flow is important. And you've done stuff that was soul sucking in your life, jobs you hated, different things. Photography is a contradiction to that. So it's really important, I think, for you, and we're kind of cheating here because I'm talking to you and talking to everyone, but is to find a way to do a project that aligns with your values. Now, someone else might say, my job is just so mentally exhausting. I want to do something where I can turn off the intellectual side of my brain and just get lost in the abstraction of leaves. And I'm like, great. So you want to get lost. How do we figure out lostness in this project? Where I would say for you, what I hear is a little bit more flow. Um, and so finding that energy to then bring into this, or someone else, it might be hustle or grit, or I really need to start providing for my family, or I really want to, whatever, um, in that way. So, and I'm wondering, there may not be any questions, but are there any questions that have come in from others or from you kind of at this juncture as we're, nearing the end? We've gone through the process of the pre-work, kind of connecting about a project, an assignment, a deliverable, which would then have accountability. What comes up for you?
Uh, I guess what's coming up for me is, how deep do you have to dig on a constant basis? What is the, I guess, if you had this to slice it up percentage wise, how much do you
Yeah.
expect someone to commit, as far as, is this something where it's like, every waking minute you're
Mm,
thinking about something? Or how much, like, what do you recommend? How do you recommend people portion it? I think for me, it's
yeah, it's a great.
portioning
Yeah.
it is like, you don't
Yeah.
want to get burnout, but if you don't commit enough time, my son with piano, if he doesn't practice enough, he's not going to get better. If he
Right.
practices too much, he's going to hate it and he's going to get burnt out. Where's the balance in something like this?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go to fitness as a maybe metaphor. Those of you who've met Derek in real life know he is so strong, man. So he really is inspiration. So if he was my fitness coach and we were talking about portion, he would not say to me, Chris, you got to work out like 4 hours a day. And you got, it would be more like, okay, let's look at your schedule. Let's look at realistically what's achievable in a consistent basis. Cause projects like this are all about consistency, right? And all about like not doing something that you're converting into soul crushing work. Cause fitness can become very soul crushing if you're not doing the right recovery or you're doing too much too fast and injury and all that stuff. I think creatively we can be injured as well. We can just kind of ruin something. It's funny thing I think it's really just tuning into where someone's at. Like sometimes it's just as simple, I'm trying to think of different people I've worked with, but I might just say like, hey, I think it would be cool for you to take, let's say someone's going through the process more of healing. They're using photography as a healing modality, and their whole goal is to be present and mindful and to process heavy emotions they're going through. And so in that case, I would say, what camera is easiest for you to use? My phone, great. Um, what what do you think will help you process? I think nature, okay, great. One something from nature once a day, it's like the thing. So I'm not going to tell them like you need to like go on a trip to Maine and capture the leaves and I want a book that has 50, it's like no, that's like it's kind of like ignoring the root of the need and the problem. So I think our ambitions creatively in fitness and nutrition and creativity, they're always higher than we're able to actually achieve. So I think trying to have really achievable goals, like when I heard you say 10 images, to me, that could be, you could actually just pull images that you guys have already done. So in theory, you could do that without even shooting, and that would still be a step towards a project. So you could do it passively rather than actively. You could also go out and do it actively, but five is such a achievable number, and I think it would be gratifying. So the analogy maybe with weights or something, it's like, yeah, 5 pound weight 5 times. Yeah, like I think you could do that, or you get the idea. So I think with people who are exploring, who want to go to greatness in photography, it's yes, having these big ambitions that we talked about. 5 months from now, I finish the book or something, but then being immensely satisfied with small steps, like immensely. Like think of my friend Keith Carter, 2 years, an empty box, but when he gets one image that he puts in there, he's just like, that's amazing. And a lot of great landscape fine art photographers have a lower image count. I think those people can really help the rest of us who have this high count. But all that being said, tuning into ourselves and finding something that is enough of a challenge. We're out of that comfort zone, but not too much that we get depleted or creatively injured or we just abandon the project. I don't know. You remember there were those things where it's like, I'm going to take one picture a day for 365 days,
God, yes.
or
365
whatever.
projects.
Yeah, or whatever it was. And someone gets 5 days in and they're just like, or same thing in fitness. I'm going to work out every day for like 6 months. And you're like, let's start with like 3 times a week or anyway. And the reason why that's so important from the creative perspective is what we want all of this to do is to be generative, right? Like the point of your project, you went back to being on this plateau. The point actually isn't the project. The point that I heard you talking about was to kind of generate this new energy and interest. You said, I'm kind of over just holding up the camera and taking the picture. The project is helping us achieve that. So I think often about this quote by Yvon Chouinard about climbing mountains. He founded Patagonia. He said, we don't climb to mountains to get to the top. We climb mountains to be changed. And it's another kind of way of saying journey, destination kind of stuff. But it's like, yeah, it's not all about the flag on top of the mountain. It's about like what happens along the way, the relationships, the things we face in ourselves, we overcome, all that stuff. So for you, it sounds like, yeah, I want this to be generative. So then therefore the pacing is based on that. Now I got to qualify that. There are other people who are like, let's go to the fitness thing. I want to run, 6-minute miles for in a marathon consistently. Then it's like, okay, game on. Here's how we're going to do that. Here's how we reverse engineer it. Here are the steps. There's a different drive, focus, vision. So it's not all about just like, let's be soft and light, but it's about the pre-work. Who are we? What are we doing? What's the real goal here? And getting to the fact that we're never going to accomplish anything if we just think will accidentally happen. We're bringing intention into the picture.
That that resonates. Really, it's like, the adage of, giving somebody fish, teaching them to fish. It's almost like
Yes.
like you nailed it. Like I don't need a fish served to me on a plate. I want to be able to go out and know how to fish whenever past this project. I mean, that's the perfect way. I didn't even think about it. And it totally puts it in perspective. It isn't about this project. It's about changing the way I approach my work. And I think that's what it is. It's not about me being able to come up with a project or my struggles coming up with projects in the past. It's about me really tapping into what drives me and what drives my work and the kind of work, back to when I was learning how to light based on fashion magazines and looking at catch lights and shadows and fall off and all that. It's kind of engineering, what do I like about images that make me feel, or what do I feel when I look at images, or what do I not feel when I look at my images?
Right, right. Yeah. And then let me just add one more little spin on this too, which I think is so helpful because you kind of called it out. You're integrating it. So this is like perfect like coaching example, right? Like I'm throwing out ideas, you're making them your own. And then the other story, this is kind of a famous story. I'll tell it wrong, but there's like a fisherman in a little village and he's sitting on the wall looking out at the sea and this businessman comes and is like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm just sitting here. What do you do? I'm a fisherman. And he's like, wow. And then he sees this guy sitting on the wall every day for, multiple days in a row. And he finally comes to him and he says, you know what? With your fishing skills, you're like the best in this town. One of the things you could do is you could buy like 5 boats and then and he goes through this whole business plan of building this whole thing and he gets to the end of it and then of running this massive, organization. And he's like, and then when you're at the end of it, you'd have all the time just to sit on this wall that you wanted. And the guy was like, well, I already have that. So why would I want all that to get this? And it's kind of one of these fun stories is that really asking ourselves, what is it that we want? And some of us want bigger, more, better. Yes, great. But then kind of asking why, does it align with who we are? And I know for you, like being a family man so important, being creative so important, and all this kind of project to me is like, it aligns perfectly because it's not like, it's not like building the fishing fleet in business. Um, it's more like being true to staying in your lane for a bit, being true, it's a stretch, it's a reach, it will evolve and grow. And then, of course, the hidden thing is we're kind of getting to is it leads to more. And that's how photography always is. The first frame's never good. The second is the first project. Maybe that one's amazing. Maybe that triggers 3 more. Um, we never know. We're not putting that expectation on it, but it's there if it's aligned and all that kind of stuff. And the reason I keep saying this aligned stuff is I know a lot of people who will chase these goals, which kind of go back to this quote. I think it was Thomas Merton who said that too often we climb a ladder and get to the top only to realize it's leaning against the wrong wall. I changed that quote. I say leaning against the wrong tree. As a kid, we would do fruit picking with these long ladders, cherry trees and stuff. And it's like, you could get a big heavy ladder, lean it against a tree and get up there and be like, oh my gosh, this tree has already been picked. This is the wrong tree for me. So making sure that the goals we're pursuing are the ones that are right for us, not for someone else. And that requires a lot of ego, a lot of self-awareness. What I mean by ego is understanding of self and identity. My mentor used to always say this and it bugged me. He said, you can't be a great photographer without a great ego. And I was just like, what are you talking about? Like, I do not like egotistical people. And I don't think ego is the way. But what he was saying was a sense of self. Ego can be, we can talk about it in a lot of different ways, but it was this sense of like, this is what I value and this is what I don't value. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is true to me. This isn't true to me. So I'm not just so influenced by the whims of the world. I'm true to that, my own inner compass, my own North Star. And it's his way of saying that. And I think he said in a way that bothered me because it challenged me versus if he had said, Chris, you got to follow your true North Star, I would have been like, yeah, man, yeah, true. It wouldn't have it wouldn't have actually sunk in. Does that make sense? It was
Totally.
too close to home. So he would find ways of saying things that would make me shake my head and then do it. So I know we're kind of getting near the end here. Other thoughts, questions, reflections, advice, wisdom for the listener, the viewer, because I know you do a lot of this work too. You could step out of the seat, stay in the seat, student seat, or anything. I'm
It was great.
curious.
It was great to be in the seat
Yeah,
because I've always been the type like, that's not going to help me. I don't need to take workshops. I know what I'm doing. I can figure it out on my own. I've been doing this a long time. I'm smart. All the excuses you want to throw out there.
yeah,
It was such a different experience. I can't thank you enough. I'll thank you right on air now. This was totally eye opening and mind opening. And so at this point, I'm gonna turn and face the viewers and tell you
yeah,
we dropped the link for Chris's website, the coaching portion of his website. Really, 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 I think this is something that everybody should consider after sitting here in the hot seat, which wasn't too hot. It wasn't that bad.
yeah, yeah.
That
It's not.
was you're chill, Chris. It's easy.
Yes.
No, this really it got my mind going from looking at the form and filling out the answers to the questions to really sitting here and being an active participant in engaging with you. I think one of the things that we talked about, Chris, back when we were talking about doing this whole series that has really, really, really stuck out to me is I know that, one of your big keystones of your mentorship is someone that is equally invested in you.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important is that that's the difference. That's the key difference between a mentorship and just getting advice or going on YouTube and looking up how to do things. It's someone who is invested in you, in your progress, in getting you where you want to get. It's someone that you look up to. Being mentored by someone that you don't want to be where they are. If they don't inspire you, then don't be mentored by them. And these are all things that came up that we've talked about
Right.
that have really, really, really sunk in. And I think it's something that it's like, if, it's not just about your work, it's about who you are as a person. This is all stuff that, conversations that I've had with you where it's like, I find a mentor that is living a way that you want to live or a way that you aspire to live or something that inspires them. And it's about deeper than the work. We talk about it all the time. Our work is so deeply connected to who we are as people. And it's just this constant weaving in and out of our photography and of our life. So, again, I'll turn to you all out there. Really, really, really look into this. I think mentorship is the one thing that a lot of people underestimate and people don't invest in themselves. It's something that if you are looking to get better as a creative, if you're looking to really tap into your full potential and really start to have more purpose, no matter what your end goals are or what the steps are along the way, I think it definitely pays to have somebody who is an outside perspective that is trying to help get you on the right path. So
Yeah.
I'll
And let
leave
me
it
just,
there.
yeah, I'll add one more thing is remember the three things I was saying were passion, practice, and feedback. And if you're like, because I was a student, we're all students or financially can do these things or not. So if you're at a place where you're like, oh, I can't do this, you still can do it. There are ways to have these relationships and you can have, let's say you're in photo school or art school or something, you could have a classmate serve as a mentor for you. In the same way, remember I mentioned the interactive design, I could have two friends come alongside me. But what you'd have to do is just play the role a little bit and say, hey, let's say we're just hanging out. I'd be like, Derek, I'm at a plateau. Will you mentor me? Here's how I'd love to kind of structure that. And in this case, I'm looking for refining my goals. I'm looking for strategy. I'm looking for accountability. We could do it every 2 weeks for 3 weeks or whatever we decide. And you could do it, right? So don't let um, any limit keep you from this if you're interested in becoming a great photographer. Because the great part, it only comes from that, I think, that third and final step of feedback. And image critique feedback is not enough because Derek could have shown me 5 of his images and 5 of his son's images, and I could have critiqued them, and it would have been all it would have been about was how to like compositionally or something change the images. There would be no project, there would be no strategy, there would be no forward momentum, there would be no like true feedback on the core idea. And I don't think it would get you past your plateau. I don't, and that's why we had images, and I kind of was like holding back on looking at them because I think you already know what makes a good image right now. So for you, it's not about like, well, you could have like darkened that corner a little bit because what that does, it gets us a little bit intellectual versus active and creative. And so um, you can do this with friends and stuff and find people um, and whatnot. So encourage you in that way. And then if anyone wants the forms that I use, I can always send you those if you're looking for some questions to trigger it or write your own. But I find but formalizing it's essential. If you just go to a buddy and say, hey, can you kind of help me with my photography? They're like, yeah, your website's pretty cool. And I like, and people do this to me, like, I like how you like capture your soul, people. And I'm like, yeah, do you have any feedback? They're like, uh, no, just like keep doing what you're doing. And I'm like, that just does nothing for me. But if I really entered that relationship, had structure to it, which creatives are, a little resistant to, magic can happen. So just explore it. If anyone's interested in kind of elevating their game, I think this is the best way, at least that I've found. I mean, of course, do all the other things, do the YouTubes, do the podcast, do the practice, cultivate your passions. We've had, figure out your gear. Yes, yes, yes to all of those. But then yes, and add this into the mix, right? It's good stuff.
Awesome. I can't say it any better. So I'm going to leave it right there. Chris is going to be back in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So make sure you guys tune into that. Chris, a huge thank you to you and of course Sony for hosting this
Yeah.
wonderful series. That is it for the rest of the day. I bid thee farewell. Another edition of the B&H Event Space now in the books. Catch you on next time.